Thank you all for being here. We have a packed program, and we'll be beginning in just 2 minutes for real. A real 2-minute warning.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Would everybody please take their seats? Good morning. Okay, library advocates, it's our 42nd National Library Legislative Day. Thank you all for coming. It's going to be a great couple of days. We're very excited to have you here. We're live streaming, so please don't stand in front of any of the cameras. And I'd like to start right out. We're going to try and keep to the schedule, which you all have. So to begin our morning, we have Ann Eubank, who is the chairman of the Committee on Legislation, COL. And she's also from the University of Montana. Ann, take it away.
It's Montana State. Yeah. There's a big Grizzlies versus Bobcats rivalry in our state, so I got to represent. So on behalf of ALA, the Committee on Legislation in the Washington office, I'd like to welcome you all to Washington, D.C. Glad that you're here. I'm particularly excited about today's lineup of speakers and briefings, and we've got a great day of learning and discovery ahead about the most important issues that are germane to libraries and all of the things that we care about. At this time, I'd like to acknowledge the Committee on Legislation and also members of its subcommittee. So if you're a COL or subcommittee member, would you please stand and be recognized? I'd also like to acknowledge the Washington office staff who worked so hard on this event and worked tirelessly year-round to ensure that library interests are at the forefront here in DC, so thank you to them as well. So enjoy your day. Have a great day of congressional meetings tomorrow, and together we make a difference. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Julius Jefferson, and I am the president of the District of Columbia Library Association. Now, real quick, is there anyone visiting DC for the very first time? Anyone? There we go. There we go. Well, to you, I want to say a special welcome to my city, my hometown, not just where I lead the association, but where I was born and raised. So on behalf of the District of Columbia Library Association, and our delegation is in the back, please stand. DCLA. Hello, DCLA, please stand. There we go. We're small, but we're mighty. We have one non-voting delegate, so hey. But you can do something about that. After your other ask, you can help us out on that. Right. I wish we had better weather for you, so we can't legislate for better weather, but it's still going to be a great day. I'm on the podium also to introduce one who leads the American Library Association with honor and distinction, a friend of mine and a friend of yours, Mr. Keith Michael Fields.
Hey, good morning, everyone. I would like to welcome you to Library Legislative Day. As you know, this is our day when hundreds of us gather together in D.C. To meet with members of Congress to talk about how we can work together to advance libraries. I have a few people that I would like to recognize. I'm going to be introducing Sari Feldman, ALA President, and Julie Tadero will be joining us about midday today, so she'll be cruising around the hill with the Texas delegation tomorrow. I'd like to recognize Susan Hildreth, ALA's Treasurer-elect. Susan. Great. Yeah. Now, Susan doesn't have a lot of experience with federal programs for libraries, so I hope that some of you will take her under your wing. I'd also like to recognize two of my board members that are here today. First of all, Mr. Julius Jefferson, great, and Sarah Kelly Johns of New York, great. I'd also like to recognize a couple of ALA staff from the headquarters side of things. Kathleen Bourdon, who's director of the Advocacy and Member Relations Department. There's Kathleen. Jeff Julian is our new head of our Public Awareness Office. Jeff is back there. Right. Sheila O'Donnell is our new head of our Development Office. And you do know that we do have a plan-giving campaign underway, and support for national advocacy is just a perfect method of leaving a legacy for future times. Okay, that was a commercial. And then last but not least, Marcy Marola, Director of the Office for Library Advocacy. Marcy's over there. Great. And last but not least, I want to echo what has already been said. Let's give a big round for Emily, Adam, and the Washington staff. Right. Another group that I would like to call out are the newbies. Will you newbies raise your hand? Oh, okay. So. And then, last but not least, are those who are joining us virtually from around the country. So welcome to Library Legislative Day. I want to just say that, as you know, the key here is that you speak for the constituents that the members of Congress serve. You have your facts, we've got our figures, we have science on our side. At the same time, you can link something that's an obscure line in a federal budget to something that is making a difference in the lives of people within the district on a daily basis. And it's that personal connection which really makes the difference. I'm going to take a point of personal privilege. This is my 30th Library Legislative Day. Right. So, and it doesn't always rain. And I want to call out then 3 delegations. I started 30 years ago as a very junior member of the New Jersey delegation. New Jersey! All right, small but loud. Okay, great. And then for 10 years, as the director of the State Library Agency in Massachusetts, I had the pleasure of leading the Massachusetts delegation. Massachusetts! All right. And now I am a proud member of course, the Illinois delegation. Illinois. All right, great. I'm just going to end up by saying that the question is, you put a lot of time and effort into coming here. Does it work? I want to go back because the Washington office celebrated a very big anniversary just recently and remind you that when the ALA Washington office was originally founded, there was no federal funding for libraries at all. And if you look at the Library Services Act, the Library Services and Construction Act, the Library Services and Technology Act, if you look at the foundation of IMLS, if you look at the E-rate, and just last year, the inclusion of libraries in the employment bill, and this year, the inclusion again of libraries in the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, all we've done with the Patriot Act, all that we've done in terms of privacy, access to information, we have a tremendous record of accomplishment. So if anyone asks you if it's worth your time to come up here and do what you do, plow the fields, the answer is it certainly is. I'm now going to introduce my president, and that is a great pleasure to introduce Sari Feldman. Sari.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Keith. It's really a great honor to be here with you today. On behalf of the association and its leaders, I'm so pleased to welcome you all to the 42nd Annual National Library Legislative Day. So I'm wowed by the number of advocates we have here today. I think it's great. We have over 500 virtual members. Hi out there. We're thinking of you and wishing you were in town with us, but glad you're participating. I want to just say that we are the most powerful when we work together, and I feel a lot of power and energy in this room today and out there in the virtual world. So thank you all very much. This week, we're going to meet with our legislative leaders, not only as library leaders, but we are also the informed and engaged citizenry and voters that they care about. We understand the power of educating legislators about the meaningful work we do to support young readers, new citizens, hardworking job seekers, and inquisitive students. Libraries transform through education, employment, entrepreneurship, engagement, and empowerment. That's what the Libraries Transform campaign is all about. It's about amplifying the message that libraries transform. That message is that libraries are neither obsolete nor nice to have. Libraries of all kinds are essential. And it's important that you all participate in this campaign. You can get more details and find out different ways that people across the country are participating by visiting librariestransform.org. The campaign's success has been greatly impacted by our champions at Overdrive. And with us today is Steve Potash, the president and CEO of Overdrive, but he's joining us as a personal supporter of America's libraries, but I think he deserves a hand. So, as we head into an election season, and nobody can forget for a moment that we are in an election season, We are in an influential time for librarians and library supporters to ask members of Congress to support generous federal funding for library programs in the 2017 fiscal year. Outside of library funding, we must also advocate for information policies that impact our ability to provide library services, such as controlling government surveillance, so the government surveillance reform, and open access legislation. But this year, we have a new and exciting issue to discuss with our members of Congress. As many of you know, President Barack Obama nominated former ALA President Carla Hayden to serve as the Librarian of Congress. I'm so excited when I say that. You probably can tell. Carla Hayden led the association from 2003 to 2004, and during that time, she was a vocal advocate for government surveillance reform. Carla is the current Chief Executive Officer of Baltimore's Enoch Pratt Free Library. She led the library from its most challenging time to today at the height of services, creating individual impact and community progress. She embraces technology and understands how it can help real people from every walk of life. And during the Baltimore riots last year, the world witnessed the way she used her leadership skills to keep her library open and safe in the midst of chaos and upheaval. It will take a special person to transform and modernize the Library of Congress, and we believe that person is Carla Hayden. We are excited to lend our support for her nomination during this year's National Library Legislative Day. Before we bring our keynote speaker to the podium, I would like to take the time to recognize one advocate in the audience who is leading efforts to support libraries in the state of Georgia. We would like to award this advocate with the 2016 White House Conference on Library and Information Services Wicklist Award. Given to a non-librarian attending National Library Legislative Day, the award covers hotel fees and provides a $300 stipend to help defray the costs of attending this event. Both the American Library Association and Wicklist are committed to ensuring that Americans receive the best service possible, and the award furthers these efforts. Historically, Wicklist was an effective force in library advocacy nationally, following the White House Conferences on Libraries and Information Services Task Force, which were held in 1979 and 1991. Wicklist turned its remaining assets over to fund this award, to spread the spirit of committed and passionate library support to a new generation of library advocates. This year, we present Dan Aldridge, a library advocate from Winterville, Georgia, with the Wicklist Award. Come up. Dan is the Vice President of the Friends of Georgia Libraries. He also served on the board of the Friends of the Brazelton Library in Georgia, where he led efforts to raise funds that allowed the Brazelton Library to purchase computers, acquire books, and to bolster its large print book collection. Library advocates like Dan are making the difference for local libraries across the nation by communicating the value of libraries to key legislators. We are proud to present this award to Dan, and we thank him for his leadership and service. Please join me in congratulating Dan for receiving the Wicklist Award. Oh my gosh, we are honored. Okay, photo op. So you Georgia libraries, you are lucky. You are on Dan's team here today. And of course, we'll all be in Georgia for midwinter. So hopefully we'll get to see Dan again. So now I would like to introduce our keynote speaker, the Honorable Representative Rush Holt. He represented Central New Jersey can cheer, in Congress from 1999 to 2015. Representative Holt may have one of the most colorful backgrounds of any congressman to hold office. A scientist by trade, he earned his bachelor's in physics from Carleton College and completed his master's and PhD at NYU. Representative Holt has held positions as a leader, Congressional Science Fellow, and arms control expert at the U.S. State Department, where he monitored the nuclear programs of countries such as Iraq, Iran, North Korea, and the former Soviet Union. He has conducted extensive research on alternative energy and has his own patent for a solar energy device. This is my favorite. He was also a 5-time winner of the game show Jeopardy! When it comes to library advocacy, Representative Rush Holt has been a strong and reliable supporter of libraries and library services, a leader who has worked tirelessly to support public, academic, and school libraries nationwide. Representative Holt introduced the Workforce Investment Through Local Libraries Act to integrate libraries into job training efforts. He has also been a consistent supporter of the Library Services and Technology Act, the only federal funding exclusively for libraries. And that's why we have to call it out tomorrow when we're on our visits. When it comes to education support, Representative Holt has also been a vocal advocate for school reform. During the last congressional session, he co-sponsored the Strengthening Kids' Interest in Learning in Libraries Act, which would have established a goal of having one qualified school librarian in every public school. In 2012, United for Libraries awarded Representative Holt with the 2012 Public Service Award for his support of libraries. We are honored to have him here today, and I would like to ask Representative Rush Holt to join me at the podium.
Thank you, Sally. Thank you very much, Sari. Oh, you look great this morning, and it is good that you are here. It is important that you're here. It's not just libraries that need you. It's not just your local communities and institutions that need you. The country needs you here for all that libraries do. I'm delighted to be among friends. I've gotten to know a number of you over my time in Congress. That ended about 1.5 years ago, but not my friendship with you. And I'm delighted to see Susan Hildreth here, and I really want to say a word first about the great work that Emily Sheketoff and her team do here on Capitol Hill and around Washington on national issues. Over my 16 years in Congress, it was a pleasure to work with the ALA Washington office. And Emily is really the best at this, and I want to join in the congratulations to Dan for his award, and I'm pleased to join Sari in commending the choice of Carla Hayden for the Librarian of Congress. I think that's really important. Keith Michael Field, a New Jerseyan, or at least we'll claim him, and anyway, a number of good friends, and I'm delighted to be with you. Libraries I grew up in libraries, and it really was my upbringing. From my earliest memories, I was interested in how the world works, that's science, and how people get along, that's politics. A lot of people think it's strange that a scientist would go into politics. I never saw any inconsistency. I mean, I remember in grade school, living essentially in libraries, reading Scientific American, Science Magazine, a word about that in a moment, because full circle, I'm now executive publisher of Science Magazine, and the Washington Post. I remember going to the public library here in DC on Mount Vernon Place. It's no longer a library. And coming across a book by James McGregor Burns about our government. And it was just, to understand the ingenuity of our Constitution. At the same time, from the library, I checked out a book published by, I think, Freeman, called The Boy Scientist. Yes, it was back in those days. Nevertheless, it was truly exciting to me. I became a scientist not because of work in a lab. Yes, I had a rock collection and I liked to mix chemicals that burned. But it was really through what I found in the library, the periodicals, the volumes that excited me about both science and politics. So it was natural when I went to Congress that I would want to defend libraries. And then when libraries came under attack, first as non-essential spending, and then as an arm of the police, to try to make you into an arm of the surveillance state, I really had to step up. And it was an honor. It was an honor to do that. Libraries are not only the place for lifelong learning. I was raised to believe that one should never be bored. There is just too much things of interest around us. And it was the libraries that taught me that. And it set me on a lifetime of learning. In Congress, people often called me studious. I think they meant that as an insult, probably. But, but it was this devotion to lifelong learning. But I'm not alone in that. I mean, all of your patrons are there at various stages of their lives for learning. And we need to preserve that. And that's what you're here to do. That's what, it's the days of Andrew Carnegie are gone. And besides, he only gave the buildings. He didn't give what made them work, which was you. So we need the federal funding. But not only that, because librarians are the bastion of communication, openness, transparency, and free speech, and civic engagement, we need to protect all of those things that allow you to do that. It would be nice if the First Amendment and the other amendments to the Constitution and the planks, the provisions of the Constitution didn't need defending, but they do. And the implementation of them needs defending too. I was really just astonished at how the sneak and peek and gag orders came to be applied to librarians. But the principal arguments against those intrusions on free speech and on open inquiry, the principal opposition to that grew out of librarians. So do not underestimate your influence. You are powerful. As you've heard, you are here to represent your constituents. You speak for your constituents, your patrons, your citizens, and you speak forcefully. The most effective argument against some of these intrusive gag rules and surveillance rules were that librarians were gagged and were also gagging their patrons. That was more effective than any of the other arguments. And so the activeness, the activity of the ALA has really made a difference. So it's not just keeping up the IMLS and keeping up the funding for libraries. It is remaining active for the civil liberties and those things that are responsible for civic engagement that you represent and can represent all the days of the year, not just on Washington Lobby Day. When I was in Congress until January of 2015, I was very much involved in ESEA, the elementary and secondary education, repeated renewal efforts and related legislation, the workforce training legislation, the various community building legislation, as well as civil liberties and surveillance legislation. And in all of those, it was a pleasure to work with the ALA. In every education bill, I tried to insert, sometimes with success, librarians. In every workforce development bill, I tried to insert librarians, sometimes with success. Because you're essential to the education, whether or not your library is associated with a school. You know that you're essential to workforce development, job hunting, job training, job preparation, job application, whether or not you have an employment center affiliated with you. But I do know more and more of you do have employment arrangements of one sort or another affiliated with you, and it just adds to your importance. So I was elected to Congress in 1998 in a district where no one from my party had been elected in anybody's memory served for 16 years, representing central New Jersey. The districts I lived through two redistricting, so I had three slightly different districts, but all central New Jersey, about 700,000 people. And in early 2014, I announced that I would not stand for another re-election after 8 terms, and partly because it just seemed time. It was not out of frustration or disappointment or anger. It was just, this isn't meant to be a lifetime job. And that's not how it was designed. And I feel great about my job, my service in Congress. An awful lot of frustrations, of course, but a number of enormous satisfactions that come from it. And I stepped aside then at the end of the current Congress, at the beginning of the current Congress, at the end of the previous Congress in January of 2015. So I've gone from who's who to who's that. And, and nevertheless, I'd like to make a few comments that might help you in your rounds on the Hill. I feel, I was going to say out of touch, and I wouldn't say that. I just feel I'm questioning whether I know anything. In light of this year's presidential primaries, I think any prognosticator or pundit or public official who claims to understand how it works is kidding themselves. Nevertheless, I'll say a few things, if I may. But I stepped aside from Congress, and very soon after that became the CEO and executive publisher of the American Association for the Advancement of Science. So AAAS is the world's largest general science membership organization. We're active in science and public policy and science and society issues, science and the law, science and religion, science education. We work with libraries on science education, and I'm open to ideas of things we might do with you even further in science education. I'm executive publisher of our family of journals. The flagship is Science Magazine, one of the oldest and I would argue finest general multidisciplinary science journals, both research, news, opinion, and perspectives. The frontline research, in fact, a lot of young researchers feel that publishing in science is a do or die requirement. I'm sorry it has become seen that way by tenure committees and department chairs. We don't want to lower our standards. We're pleased that being published in science is important, but we do think that it has become misused in a lot of universities. I mean, the act of being published in science. But it's a fine journal, and I'm happy to hear from you about that. By the way, I would say we're the good guys. We're a nonprofit organization, or at least we try to be the good guys in this. We also have an open access online journal called Science Advances. We publish science cell signaling and science translational medicine. We have 2 new journals coming out that I wanted to bring to your attention. I know Emily didn't invite me here to make plugs for our publications, but we do have 2 new publications coming up, Science Robotics and Science Immunology, which there are trial subscriptions available for libraries. And we really have high hopes for those. But AAAS is involved around the world on some of the same issues that I worked on in Congress, things that I know you care about. And so I want to hear from you. We have more than 100,000 members. I'm hoping that we'll become much larger because we'll be even more effective as a force for science the more members we have. And when I say science, I use a very simple definition, but I think a very complete and accurate definition. Science is asking questions so they can be answered empirically and verifiably. Any third grader can do that until we tell them they shouldn't, unless they're going to become professional scientists, and which is a problem we face in our educational system. We really have bifurcated the student population and now the adult population and members of Congress. Because members of Congress, I served in the House of Representatives. Members of Congress are representative. And to the extent that the public has turned off on evidence-based thinking, so has Congress, their representatives. So bear that in mind. I would argue that your greatest task, most important task, would be to get members of Congress and then, of course, the people from whom they derive their thinking, the general public, to think more like scientists, to think based on evidence, open communication of that evidence, and subjecting your conclusions, your treatment of that evidence to public peer scrutiny, or in other words, having somebody else check your work. A third grader can understand that. You ask a question so it can be answered based on observation and evidence. You communicate that openly and somebody else checks your work. I wish that went on more commonly in this country. We would not have gone to war in Iraq. The weapons of mass destruction weren't there, but the public did not demand the evidence that they were there. They just went on the say-so. Whether you're talking about climate change or any number of other subjects, the same thing applies. So what is a tall order for you, but I think the most important thing you can do is to try to communicate the importance of evidence-based thinking so that the decisions in Congress are not made on ideology first, but on the basis of tested observations. That goes for any area, whether you're talking about libraries and education or transportation and public health. You know, where we have a country where millions of Americans deny their kids vaccinations, and this is troubling to me, many millions more say, well, that's okay if that's what they want to do. Flies in the face of evidence-based thinking. So, remember that the people you will be seeing, you might get to see a few representatives, most likely not. Most of them will be out of town. But the thing to remember is that the staff that you get to see really reflect the frame of mind, the approach of the person whose name is on the door. It's been my observation that the staff generally do behave like the member. And they have their eyes on the people they're representing. But of course, that's you. So unlike some lobbyist who comes to town, who's already in town, I beg your pardon, who comes to Capitol Hill representing some issue, you're representing some issues, yes. But really, you're representing the people that they claim to be representing. So that gives you an advantage. And, Nancy Pelosi always said, there are three, when you come to Washington, you should keep three things in mind. Your conscience, the Constitution, and your constituents, the 3 C's. And that's, I think, good guidance. There aren't a lot of other things on that list. And there's nothing wrong with that. People say, well, are you in Congress to lead, or are you there to represent the constituents? Well, yes, both. But it is the House of Representatives. So approach them that way. Now, there are 435, or if you count the unelected representatives from the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, American Samoa, and so forth. There are 440 different approaches to the job of representative in the House of Representatives. And I won't even speak about the Senate. Tip O'Neill told his House members, the other party is the opposition. The enemy is the Senate. No, it's much of what I'm saying applies to the Senate just as well. But I should talk about what I know or used to know anyway. So I think the advantage you bring to this is that you too represent the constituents. Now, in getting your message across, the same thing applies anytime you're trying to get your message, whatever message it is, across. It is tell a story. It's the way humans think. I don't know anyone who is persuaded by charts and graphs. They're persuaded by anecdotes. Now, your anecdotes certainly should be consistent with the facts, but it's not the facts that will convince anyone. It is the story, and you've got a great story to tell. Whether your interests are education or civic participation or workforce development or research or whatever your particular library perspective might be, you have that story to tell. The other thing to remember, and this is completely consistent with what I was just saying, is, as again, quoting Tip O'Neill, all politics is local. So you'll get a fact sheet from Emily, no doubt, about the issues, but what counts is what's happening on Main Street. What's happening in that library and the community institutions and people that are associated with it. So, all politics is local. With that in mind, let me bring my greetings to Pat Tumulty, to Mary Shute, to Susan Bryant, Peggy Cardigan, Cynthia Cizak, Esney Sharp, Adam Skapaniak, Terry Taylor, and Marcos Vargas from the Garden State. Good to see you. Thanks.
Good morning. I'm Lisa Lindell. I'm the Grassroots Communication Specialist for the Washington office. A lot of you have met me before, but some of you haven't. You've definitely received a lot of emails from me, especially in the last week. So now you get to see me in person. It's really great to see all of you here. I'm excited to be able to talk to you a little bit today about an advocacy video series that we've been working on for the past year with a group called the Harry Potter Alliance. I'm going to go ahead and call Katie Bowers, their Harry Potter Alliance campaign director, up to talk to you a little bit about what the Harry Potter Alliance is all about, and then I'll show you a little bit more about this video.
Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. I'm from the HPA. We use stories and pop culture to inspire young people and also young at heart people to get involved with community service and social change movements. Our philosophy is that the stories that inspire us to imagine really incredible worlds can also inspire us to imagine a better world and to act for that better world in real life. And it really works. We've done a ton of stuff over 10 years. We've donated 250,000 books around the world. We've organized 20,000 YouTubers and fans to advocate for net neutrality. And this week we have hundreds of young people signed up to write letters and make phone calls, or what we're saying, send owls to Washington. So really excited about that. And if you think we sound really cool, we have 200 chapters in 21 countries around the world, and we have tons of resources that we give away to those chapters entirely for free. So I'd love to talk to you about giving you those resources to your library.
Katie. So I think all of you probably remember how you felt the first time you had to call a member of Congress. It was probably a little bit intimidating. There are a lot of people in this room who have been doing it for years, so think back a little bit to the first time you had to do that. There were a lot of barriers between you and taking that first step. When we were talking with the HPA last year and first addressing the possibility of working together to collaborate on a series, we wanted to identify ways that their members could get involved in library advocacy and also ways that we could help them get through those barriers, because it can be very intimidating, especially when you're 15 years old, 18 years old, to figure out how you call your congressman. Who is your congressman? How do you find out? What do you do if you want to plan a campaign? Do you write a press release? All of that can be very scary for a young person. But the one reoccurring theme when we've discussed these things with the Harry Potter Alliance is that their young folks, the people in their chapters, want to be involved. They just aren't sure how. So this video series really aims to help those people figure out how they can get involved in their own communities. So we started with this video series. The first episode is what I'm going to show you today. Talks a little bit about how they can get involved just to take the very first steps, figuring out who their legislators are, and then we walk them through how to write press releases, if they want to do a campaign or a demonstration, how do they research issues, and we went ahead and stopped by New York Public Library, interviewed some of their librarians to talk about how they could use library resources for that purpose. And we had an interview with Senator Reed from Rhode Island, and he talked to them a little bit about what it looks like for young people to be involved and why it's important for them. And then we also talk to their staff so that we can identify, this is who you're actually talking to when you're calling a member of Congress's office. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and show you the video, and hopefully that it will be helpful not only for the HPA as they roll out this video series to their members, but also to educators and librarians who want to reach out to young people in their own schools or libraries.
You hear a lot about legislators. Call them, email them, tweet them. Okay, but who exactly are these legislators? Don't worry. Whether you need a little refresher or at this point you've just been too afraid to ask, we've got you covered. Legislator basically means lawmaker. It's someone who can decide what...
Uh-oh. I think we lost our internet connection. Special shout out to the Wi-Fi. Oh no. 1 second, folks.
Okay, while Lisa is working on our technical problem, a number of you have in your folders the schedule that did not print on both sides. So I'm just going to go over what the schedule is for the day. So whether you're missing page 1 or page 2, here you go. So, hello, we're listening now. So after this, there'll be a very brief break. Then at 10:05, we're going to do an issue brief review. We have 4 people speaking. After each person speaks, there'll be 5 minutes for questions. And then at the end, for as much time as we have, there'll be more questions. At 11:05, I'll be boring you with the future National Library Legislative Days. Then we're taking a group photo. So everybody stay in your seats, and we have a photographer with a wide-angle lens. And then that photo will be available for all of you to use in any of your promotion or anything else. Lunch from 12 to 1:30 on your own. And now we're back.
Okay. We're going to give this a try, see if it loaded correctly this time.
You hear a lot about legislators. Call them, email them, tweet them. Okay, but who exactly are these legislators? Don't worry. Whether you need a little refresher or at this point you've just been too afraid to ask, we've got you covered. Legislator basically means lawmaker. It's someone who can decide what becomes law. In the United States, legislators are members of Congress, which includes the House of Representatives and the Senate. Most citizens, sorry DC and the territories, are represented by one member of the House and 2 senators. Each of these people handle every issue under the sun, from trade to energy to whether there should be a post office named after Elvis. And to manage this workload, both the House and the Senate are broken down into committees that handle particular subject matter, like education, agriculture, aliens, probably. Congress does a lot of stuff, like regulates commerce, approves Supreme Court justices, and can even attempt to impeach the president. Shout out to my fellow 90s kids. Most relevant for us, though, they can pass laws. The president can veto those laws, but Congress can override that veto if they get enough votes. Also, the Supreme Court can declare a law unconstitutional. But let's rewind to actually making laws. A draft of a law is called a bill, and anyone can write a bill. Yeah, even you. But only members of Congress can introduce it into the House or the Senate. Bills are kind of like vampires. They need an invitation from someone who lives in Congress to get in. Once a bill is cleared by the Congress bouncers, it gets examined by those committees we mentioned. They study it and vote on changes they want to make. If the committee gives it a thumbs up, a like, or a reblog, it's eligible to get voted on by the full House of Representatives and/or the Senate, if that's what the leaders of those chambers want. If not, or if it never clears the committee, well, it probably won't ever be seen again. R.I.P. Bill. To get turned into official law, it has to pass both the House and the Senate, but sometimes they approve different versions of the bill. Kind of like if someone invited you over to watch Star Wars and you were expecting the original versions, but it turned out they wanted to watch the remastered versions from 1997. Sorry dude, Han shot first. If that happens, a special conference committee of members from both the House and the Senate have to meet to iron out the differences and draft a final bill. So I guess in the case of Star Wars, that final bill everyone is happy with would be The Force Awakens. Once a bill is passed by both the House and the Senate, the president has 10 days to sign or veto it. This process also more or less happens at the state level. In the United States, we have both federal, aka national, and state governments. This means you're represented by members of the US Congress as well as members of state legislators. And that word representing is important because legislators are supposed to represent the people who elected them. That's why everyone wants you to contact your legislators, because if they don't know how you feel about something, they can't properly represent you. Each episode, we'll be setting small challenges you can take to make a big change in your community. To start this week, look up who your state and federal representatives and senators are. Being familiar with local government is key to making change. And let us know in the comments what issues you care about right now. And be sure to subscribe to follow our 8-part series on creating change and taking action. So join us next time when we take a peek behind the scenes of government life. Thanks for watching, and good luck.
So as you can see, that we're hoping that this video series is really going to be very helpful, not only for the target demographic, which is kind of the 13 to 22-year-old range, but also with any educators who are hoping to use these kinds of resources to reach out to their young folks and get them involved at an early age so that we don't end up having, an older group of young people who just aren't sure how to get involved or where they can get involved. We're going to be hosting this video series on the Harry Potter Alliance YouTube channel. We'll also have a playlist on the ALA YouTube channel, so you'll be able to find it there as well. And of course, we'll be posting it and sending it around in all of the listservs and on all the social media. So if you have any questions, feel free to get in touch with me. My name is Lisa Lindell again, and I'm pretty easy to track down, especially today. So if you see me, feel free to flag me down. Thank you.
Okay, and just to continue, the schedule, 1:30, Hill Staff Secrets, What Makes for a Successful Meeting with Jenny Backus, President and CEO of Backus Consulting, from 2 to 2:30, Spotlighting the Importance of Libraries in an Election Year with Sari Feldman, Jan Sanders, and Christian Zabriskie. 2:30, a break. 2:45, the Policy Revolution update. You've all been hearing about the Policy Revolution with Alan Inouye and Lara Clark. At 3, a press and media training. And then at 5 o'clock, the reception in Hart 902, which you've seen directions to on the screen. So that's it. You've got a break until 10:05. Please get back promptly because we've got a chock-a-block schedule for another hour and a half. Thank you. good. Oh, yeah, you got your badge. You're all set. Can everyone take their seats, please?
Emily, we need our panelists, so let's not start yet, okay?
Don't worry, they're not sitting down. Okay, folks, can we take our seats, please? Okay, we're getting quiet, please. For the state coordinators, you were sent a survey, and we're really hopeful that you will fill it out and forward it to your delegation. It's important for we lobbyists to follow up on your meetings, especially to know the results of your meetings. So let us know if you have established a relationship with the staffer that you met with, so that we can call upon you to help us with that staffer when an issue comes up. So it's very important that you all fill out those surveys so that we know who you met with and what the results of that meeting were. And now we come to what I think is the most important part of our briefing day, and that is the issue briefings. And we're missing Kevin. So I'm going to take this opportunity to thank the ALA Washington staff and especially the government relations staff. You've seen Lisa Lindell, who is the coordinator for Ledge Day. You met out at registration Roz Reynolds, who is a tremendous help in this. We also have Adam Eisgrau, Jessica McGilvery, Stephen Mayo, who's in the back taking photographs, and Kevin Marr, who's going to be here, sitting up here in just a moment. And also, you've got on the back of your badges the badge asks. But there's a lot more going on than just the 4 badge asks. And I don't mean just the presidential race. So many of you know, especially from public and community college libraries, that libraries have become very involved in workforce innovation and investment. And so we've been very pleased that libraries are part of the new workforce legislation called WIOA, Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. The regulations on this program that was passed almost 2 years ago might come out before June 30th. Please don't bet your mortgage on that. We've been waiting a long time to find out how this program is going to work. But in the meantime, there will be a program at Annual Saturday morning at 8:30 called Concrete Tips to Take Advantage of Workforce Investment Funding. It will be in the Convention Center, room W303, and it will be 2 panels giving you concrete ways that you can connect with either your state or local workforce people so that you can participate in your state's workforce activities. The other big important thing happening now is the confirmation of Dr. Carla Hayden to be the Librarian of Congress. We're very excited about this. She had a hearing with the House Rules and Administration Committee on April 17th, and it went great. Hopefully many of you saw it. It was live streamed from the committee. It was on C-SPAN, so it got a lot of public attention. She has been sent questions, additional questions to answer, and those questions will be answered on the record. After the committee gets those answers, they'll vote to send her name to the full Senate. The full Senate may vote before the July 4th recess, which is really what we're hoping. Okay. And every senator's vote is needed. The House does not vote on this, only the Senate votes to confirm. So that's why it's most important for the Senate. Kevin is on his way up, and he will be talking about the all-important appropriations and LSTA reauthorization. So I'm just going to tap dance for another few seconds till Kevin gets up here. See, we're like a well-oiled machine.
All right, thank you. As Emily said, I'm Kevin Maher, Assistant Director of Government Affairs in your Washington office with OGR. I'm here, this is my second Ledge Day, so I'm happy to be here and meet many of you and looking forward to meet many more of you. So I'm here really to kind of talk about funding for the library programs, LSTA and IAL, because they're important and affect many of you in the room. I also want to mention that I also work on telecommunications, and I know these issues are important to many of you, and there is a lot of activity over at the FCC and some activity in Capitol Hill dealing with these issues. We know there's a lot of activity around Lifeline, FCC authorization, net neutrality, and things like that are moving, but we really kind of wanted to make the most effective use of your time, because from a macro standpoint, a lot of these telecommunications issues, as important as they are really kind of are getting caught up in the politics of Washington. It's really hard to see how a lot of these issues are going to get bipartisan support and get to the president for his signature. So we're really just kind of focused today in my issue areas on funding issues. LSTA and IAL are the two primary programs that we've been focusing on. And last year, at the end of last year, we had some good news on the programs, as if you recall, at the end of, before he was out the door, at the end of his tenure as Speaker of the House, Speaker Boehner put together a bipartisan budget agreement, which really kind of allowed the government to keep functioning. It didn't close the government down, and provided a lot of additional funding for a lot of domestic programs. And for our programs, that was good news. For LSTA, we saw about a $2 billion bump in our programs to $182.9 million, and that was a $2 million, was a welcome increase for grants to state. That was about $1 million of that increase went to the grants to states, to $155.8 million. So it was welcome news. Any additional funding, particularly these days, is very welcome, so we're very pleased with that. However, this year we're a little bit concerned because the budget process, the appropriations process, really starts when the president submits his budget to Congress, which usually comes shortly after the State of the Union. And this year, at the start of the process, the president is actually requesting less funding for LSTA and the grants to states. So we're definitely concerned about that. The cut to LSTA would be about $500,000, but the grants to states program would be cut about $1 million, about $950,000 in that program. So we're particularly concerned there because a lot of states match the grants to states funding that they get. So it's not just a $950,000 cuts, it's actually much bigger for library programs as well. So that's one of the reasons why the Dear Appropriator letters are so important. What happens when the president submits his budget, a lot of programs, a lot of members of Congress and the House and the Senate, and a lot of organizations such as ALA begin a sort of a furious sprint to get as many signatures as they can. And we've done well. We got 88 signatures in the House and 34 signatures in the Senate in support of funding for LSTA. And really the reason these are important is I've been in meetings with congressional staff that work on appropriations, and it's not at all uncommon they've told us where their boss will come to them, or the chairman of the subcommittee will say, hey, I just got this great idea. I need $10 million to fund it. So you need to find a program that we can cut for $10 million. And they'll go through all these programs, and they'll find 2 programs that, maybe we can cut $10 million from one of these programs. Well, Program A has a Dear Appropriator letter signed by 75, 100 members of Congress. The Program B will not have a Dear Appropriator letter. So, which program are they going to recommend to their boss gets cut? So that's really why these letters are so important. And this year we had about a 2-week window really to get all the signatures. It was a shorter window, but we did quite well. And the ask in the letter this year was $186.6 million. And the reason we took that number, which is actually an increase, but we took that number because last year that is what the president recommended to Congress as the needed funding for LSTA. Now for innovative approaches to literacy, which is, as you know, half of that funding is reserved for school libraries. Last year, the funding, because of the bipartisan budget agreement, it actually provided $2 million bump also to that program, so we're at $27 million this year for the program. We're actually in a very good position with IAL because not only do we have the additional funding already, but it was authorized in the ESSA, which is always a very good position to be in when you can go, particularly a lot of Republican members of Congress always say that we shouldn't fund programs that aren't authorized. So this program was authorized in the ESSA, and the president is also requesting $27 million. So it's a good position to go in, particularly with Republican offices, to say, yes, it's authorized, yes, we're asking for level funding, we're not asking for an increase. So the letters there, we had 124 signatures in the House and 32 signatures in the Senate. So we got really good support in both of these letters as well. And I will just mention briefly, the Department of Education, if you don't know, has opened the process for the applications for innovative approaches to literacy grants. You've got about another week and a half or so. Go to our website. We have information about that if you want to quickly put together a submission there, or give me a card and I can send you information as well on that. And from a macro standpoint, kind of where we're headed. The process starts when the president submits his budget. You get the Dear Appropriator letters in, and then what's supposed to happen is the House and Senate are supposed to put a budget on the floor, and that's kind of the messaging statements in the House and the Senate of what the majority party's priorities are for spending and revenue. Well, we've already kind of gone off the rails on that. There's a group of conservative members in the House Freedom Caucus, that want to undo the bipartisan budget agreement. So because of that, the new Speaker Ryan does not have the votes to bring up a budget at that point. Now, you don't absolutely have to have a budget, but it really kind of limits their option and really kind of slows down the process in the House. For one thing, they cannot bring up any appropriations bills until mid-May. So if they wanted to, get moving quickly on this, they couldn't. They just were not able to bring up any appropriations bills. So we're kind of in that process. Speaker Ryan is trying to figure out how he can craft a budget together, or just move on without a budget. And it's a little bit of a messaging problem not to have a budget. In the Senate, what they've done is they were a little bit more creative. They've what they've called deeming. They've deemed the bipartisan budget agreement, which is essentially a 2-year budget. They've said, okay, we passed the budget, this year's budget last year, so they could move a little bit faster on that. And that was going along well. They were moving some of the bills until last week, when they were looking at one of the more non-controversial bills, the energy and water. But a senator from Arkansas introduced an amendment to try and undercut. The intent of the amendment was to undercut the president's nuclear agreement with Iran. And because of that, the Senate leadership pulled all the appropriations bills. And this week and next week, they're trying to figure out how to move forward on that. So appropriations process is already turning to be quite a mess. And what's probably going to happen, what all the congressional staff have been telling us in the meetings, is we're going to wind up in what's called a continuing resolution. Some of you may know what that is, but it's basically Congress throwing up its hand saying, we can't come to an agreement on an appropriations bill by October 1st. So we're going to take all of last year's funding levels and continue them forward for a period of time. And sometimes it's a period of time to let the Appropriations Committee finish its work. Sometimes it's just because they can't get to any sort of agreement, so they come up with this continuing resolution. Now, the problem this year is it's an election year, it's a transition year. So if they do a continuing resolution, sometimes they can do it for 2 months, 3 months. Well, at that point, you've got an administration in the White House and all of these staff people, no matter who wins the White House, even if a Democrat wins the White House, you got a whole lot of people that are going to be leaving their jobs and changing jobs. So that's the real question is who's going to be doing the negotiating and the work on the budget process for the administration when a lot of people are headed out the door. The second issue is ESSA really kind of made really significant changes to a lot of programs in the education program. So one of the things the congressional staff the appropriations staff doesn't really want to think about at this point is they're going to have to put together a continuing resolution for a lot of programs that have been changed. Some have been ended and restarted in another area in the budget. So it's kind of a big knot that they're going to have to untangle to figure out how to continue those programs as well. So then there's the political issue of, some thought that if a Republican does win the presidential election, the Republicans may try to put together a short-term continuing resolution, maybe until March or so, and allow the new Republican president to come in and figure out their spending priorities. If a Democrat wins the White House, Republicans in Congress will try and put together a longer-term CR to limit the new Democratic president's ability to spend money. That's wishful thinking, and it's going to be very curious to watch as the year goes on. Now, when we were going up there, and we talk about, Congressman, Holt was talking about the effectiveness of the stories, and those are very effective. I've been trying to collect a lot of LSTA and IAL stories, and when I can go into, Senator Roy Blunt's office in Missouri and talk about the Race to Read program in Missouri and how LSTA made that possible, or Senator Mark Kirk's office in Illinois and talk about the library outside of St. Louis that lost part of its collection to water damage, and LSTA allowed them to replace that, or go into Congresswoman Barbara Lee's office in California and talk about the program with Cal Vets, working together with returning veterans and libraries, or Waukegan, Illinois took an IL grant to deal with literacy programs, and those are very effective. The members of Congress love to hear these stories, and they really show how important they are, particularly when we're talking about LSTA, because if we're talking about cutting the funding for that, or that's additional multiplier effect by losing the state funding. So a lot of these programs were created because of the grant or because of this funding. So if you take it away, it's not that they're going to be reduced; they're going to be eliminated. And they the value of these programs in your community. So it's very important to have these stories as well. And the other thing is the letters. We have, if your members of Congress sign these Dear Appropriated letters, it's really important to thank them. They like to know that their work is appreciated and noticed. So we have, having gone to our website, we do have the list of the members of Congress that have signed the letters in the House and the Senate. There are 2 in the House and 2 in the Senate. Thank them for these letters. If they haven't, ask them why not. Some offices just have a blanket policy. We don't sign any of these letters, particularly if they're on the Appropriations Committee. They just won't sign the letters, and that's fine. But they need to know that you've noticed that they're not on these letters as well. So it's important to thank them and remind them that next year we're going to be back asking them to again sign these letters as well. And I'll just conclude one final note is, talking about authorization. LSTA is currently authorized, but their authorization does run out this year. And at some point later this year, we're kind of in the process of putting together what the reauthorization is going to look like, talking about what the funding levels are, what changes in the program we would like to see. There's just sort of an early warning at your point is we're going to be coming back to you some point this summer to talk about the authorization for LSTA, and we're going to really need you to go to members of Congress and ask them to support the reauthorization for LSTA. It's probably not going to be a standalone bill. There's just not really enough time to get standalone bills like this through Congress, so we're going to have to find some vehicle that's going to move, that's going to allow this program to go through. But stay tuned. You'll be hearing more about that as well. So I think I've talked long enough. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer them or make them up. First question, anybody have a question? Okay, we'll have time for the questions, and feel free to stop me any time in the hall or send me an email or call Jessica.
Okay, good morning. I am Jessica McGilvray, Deputy Director of the Office of Government Relations, and I'm really excited to see so many people here today willing to advocate for libraries and for the people that you all serve. So I'm talking about government information issues. As librarians, we support access to government information. And so we're going to start with FOIA, Freedom of Information Act. This is the 50th anniversary of FOIA this year, July 4th. And so perfect time to make the needed reforms that we've been trying to get through Congress the last couple of years. So we have two bills, HR 653 and S 337. They have both passed their respective houses. And so now they need to enter the conference stage, just like we had with the ESSA last year. That hasn't started yet. We are hoping it will. I'm sure you guys have heard that, we don't expect Congress to be in very much this summer with the presidential election coming up and everyone running. We know they're going to be out, right? Recesses are going to be long this summer. They don't have that many days to legislate. So we are hopeful that since both of these bills have finally passed, that they will come together, figure out a way to make both sides happy so that we can get the reforms we need to the Freedom of Information Act. And so what we're hoping and what both bills do is codify a presumption of openness, which is something that President Obama put in his first day in office. So we want to actually make it law. And then improve public access to released records, better define and guide the use of agency-assessed fees for documents, because some agencies were charging hundreds of thousands of dollars for certain reports, and that's excessive. Strengthen the Office of Government Information Services, which is a new office. It's been around for about 8 years now, I think. And it needs more staff, and it needs to have a little bit more power. And these bills would do that. So we have some big supporters for Freedom of Information Act, and I'm going to read those names. If they are your people, your senators, your representatives, please do thank them for their work on these bills. Let them know that we appreciate it and that we are here to help them if they need it as they go into this conference period. So Senator John Cornyn of Texas, Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Grassley, Iowa, Judiciary Ranking Member Patrick Leahy in Vermont, Representatives Issa, California, Cummings in Maryland, Quigley in Illinois. So they all introduced or co-sponsored the bill and really did push to get these through in a year when not a whole lot of legislation is getting passed. So please do thank them for that. The next bill we're going to talk about is FASTER, Fair Access to Science and Technology Research Act. If you've been coming to Ledge Day for a couple of years, this bill is not new to you. We've been talking about it for a number of years. Each Congress is getting reintroduced, and we keep moving forward. We're kind of going at a snail's pace, but we are making progress. It's the same bill that was introduced last Congress. We are still supporting it. It's Senator Cornyn that has been really persistent in introducing this and pushing for it. So again, please thank him for his wonderful work in trying to get greater access to government information. Okay, and those are identical bills in both the House and Senate, and they haven't moved. So the last thing I want to talk about for government information is the Congressional Research Service reports. This is an interesting situation. We have two identical bills, Equal Access to Congressional Research Reports Act of 2016. It's S 2639 and HR 4702. And the bills are identical in both the House and the Senate, so they direct the U.S. Government Publishing Office to establish and maintain a website that provides access to CRS reports that are searchable, sortable, and downloadable at no additional fee to the public. And they don't compel the release of any private congressional correspondence. This is kind of a contentious issue in Congress because Congressional Research Service works for Congress. And so you have some members of Congress and actually staff, I've spoken to staff that don't think these should be accessible to the public. So it's really important that we explain to them why, as government information, federal documents, they should be accessible to the public because they're not classified and you pay for them as taxpayers. So express that to them, please. And we also know that in the House, Representative Quigley of Illinois, he's offering several amendments on CRS, and we haven't seen the language. He's doing this at the House Appropriations markup. So this is going to be a big markup for us because, as Adam will talk about later, we have Library of Congress issues happening there as well. And he is one of the co-sponsors of the bill in the House. So we assume that the amendments will be favorable to us and that they'll be very similar to the bill. We don't know because we haven't seen them. But you can say that we know these are coming, and we hope that folks in the House will be supportive of them. Okay, so that's government information. I'm going to go to school libraries real quick and then ask if you guys have any questions. So ESSA passed. Yay, that's a huge victory. Yes, you guys did an amazing job. And it really is the years of advocating that you all did that made this so favorable for libraries. So now that that's passed, we're done at the federal level, right? So we have, Congress has done their job. It's moved to the Department of Education, where they're beginning the process of negotiated rulemaking. So now's the time for library officials to be talking to school officials. And we have papers on what's in the bill, or the law now, and what libraries can get, because the funding is not mandated, but we're allowed to apply for it. So we should do that. We should use the money that we have access to. So AASL is hosting a program at annual conference, Unpacking ESSA for the Library Ecosystem. It's on Friday, June 24th from 8 to 9:30, and it's going to give a general overview of the new law and examples and insights to form coalitions both within the library ecosystem and without. So if you are going to be annual conference and you're interested in this bill and moving it forward, please do take advantage of the program. There's also a second session that's specifically for school librarians, speaks more to, as a school librarian, how can you advocate? So we have the general librarian picture and then the school librarian picture in the same room. No, but we have Leslie Preddy and Sylvia Norton here who will be happy to talk to you about that, and they're sitting in the front row. And Leslie's the president of AASL this year. Okay, so any other questions? That's what I had for school libraries. Yes? Is it being recorded?
There was a possibility, but I don't know whether it's going to make it. But there'll be more of it out on the web soon.
Okay.
It's just been put together now.
Well, it's being asked for, so maybe that will help you get it recorded. Oh, sorry, the question was, is the program at annual going to be recorded? And the answer was, we are unsure.
I believe it will be.
But Sylvia believes it will be.
I'm cautiously optimistic.
Yes?
What is the reason behind the pushback for not wanting to release the CRS report? Is there anything else the board doesn't know about ahead of time?
So their reasoning is that it can show the hand of the member of Congress that you're asking because for research on a certain issue that they're going to introduce a bill on, or they're trying to make arguments against somebody else's bill. And so it can show, kind of just shows their hand of the arguments that they might want to make. And the other thing is that just CRS works for Congress, they don't work for us. And as, you know, they just don't think we need access to it. Yeah, I mean, those are the two main arguments I've heard. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The FOIA Act going to conference, what's the disparity? Which side are we rooting for?
We like the Senate bill. Yeah.
And why?
It gives us just a little bit more. But honestly, the four things that I read are in both bills, and we'd be happy with that. We're hoping that's what we'll get out of conference. So, I mean, it would be a lot more than we've had the last number of years. Any other questions? Oh, I'm sorry. Jim was asking about FOIA and the conference process. No more questions? Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Adam.
Hello. Everybody's still awake after all of that. Excellent.
Before I dive into the issues, I wanted to acknowledge that not only do we have a capacity crowd here, but if you can have a capacity crowd on the internet, I think we have that too. At least I hope so. So for those of you who are joining us specifically for the live first time ever streamcast of National Library Legislative Day Briefing, we appreciate you very much being here. And he said, rapidly fast forwarding to the end of his slides, we want to thank Google for making that possible, by no means incidentally. The public policy shop of Google here are folks that we work with extensively on policy in many, many coalitions. They're very generous around town in ways, of course, that are strategic, but they're strategic both for Google and for us, and we appreciate their support of our program here today. Speaking of which, fasten your seatbelts. We got a lot to talk about, and the good news is my colleagues didn't use all their time. I won't use all my time either. Maybe. Possibly. We'll see. I started a timer, I promise. Copyright. Everybody know why we care about copyright? Everybody here care about copyright? Can I get a C? Not bad. Not bad for copyright. There are a few things we care about in copyright.
HR 862 from the bottom of your one-pager, HR 1883, and HR 1587.
Are important bills. They're not going anywhere, but we like them, and it's important for you to know about them, and important if the subject of copyright comes up and somebody says, what else do you care about? The bottom of the one-pager you have that starts off with support the Marrakesh Treaty are the answers to those questions. Happy to talk more about any of those in Q&A time, which we will have at the end of this little segment. When we work on bills on copyright, and we often do it in coalition with other library groups, with technology companies, not incidentally, with civil liberties groups around town, we do so because it's a speech issue. All of copyright would be in conflict with the First Amendment. No joke. It's a prior restraint on speech, as the real lawyer types would say, unless you've got safety valves in it, unless you have meaningful limitations and exceptions on what are very, very strong rights that owners are given in the copyright law. So when we work with the Hill to work on legislation like the kind bullet pointed at the bottom that I was just teasing about a little bit here, it's important because they're always about expanding access to information, notwithstanding copyright rights. That doesn't mean there's anything wrong with copyright rights. They're a good thing. They incentivize creativity. Librarians, no matter what anybody on the Hill may tell you, and you tell them otherwise, librarians like copyright. We spend $4 billion a year on copyrighted material. So the notion that librarians want everything to be for free or are anti-copyright or anti-property, baloney, to pick a polite word in polite company. Tell them so. But when we work on bills like this, it's because the balance of copyright between rights and limitations on those rights are out of whack. And bills like this are efforts, always incremental, to put things right. I say always incremental, almost always. Sometimes there are big efforts to reform copyright in big ways. And a couple of years ago, the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, Bob Goodlatte of Virginia, said, we need comprehensive copyright reform. And he embarked on a series with his colleagues on the judiciary, trudging along behind him for years, of 24 hearings. 24 hearings, no joke. I don't know of another situation in which over that period of time, that many hearings have been done that comprehensively on that much stuff. So what's going to happen as a result? Well, we might have partial copyright reform where there's consensus. Where's their consensus? Reporters called me up last week and asked. We're not sure what the chairman is referring to, but we'll find out. After 2 years and 24 hearings, he wants to be able to do something. We'll be delighted to work with him, and we're going to be. So when you hear about copyright reform, when you hear about copyright review, when you hear about copyright in Congress at all, that's the backdrop for all of this. It's always contentious because, as you gathered from my discussion of rights versus limitations and exceptions on those rights, heads can get knocked a little bit when that comes down, and where there isn't consensus, Congress doesn't move very fast. However, speaking of consensus, we hope everybody loves, and your job is to make sure that everybody loves, the Marrakesh Treaty, adopted, where was it adopted?
Marrakesh. Excuse me, in 2013. Yes, it's 2016. We're coming up on 3 years since a treaty for the radical proposition that electronic materials in formats that can be used by print-disabled people should be freely transmittable around the world between and among authorized entities, not even John and Jane Q. Public, but authorized entities around the world should be able to share this material for the benefit of those specialized populations to get all of the economic development, personal enrichment benefits that would come for it. That needed an international treaty because most countries around the world don't have what we have here in US copyright law called the Chafee Amendment. And that's a good thing, which allows us in the States to share information electronically among authorized entities like libraries, like some not-for-profit companies that make this material available. But you can't do that all the way around the world. And that means that everybody else in the world needs this treaty, and people here in the United States need the treaty so we can benefit from materials that are elsewhere in the world. It's not like we have everything. We happen to be blessed with a lot. But that's not to say that a Brazilian-speaking graduate student doesn't need access to materials that he or she can access despite being blind or otherwise print disabled in the terms. So we are actively supporting ratification by the Senate, the House does not have a role in this, of the Marrakesh Copyright Treaty. Now, the Marrakesh Treaty had a real advantage, which was that under US law, really no changes when you looked at the law dispassionately needed to be made. So great, let's just bring up the treaty in the Foreign Relations Committee, they'll have a hearing, we'll put it on the floor of the Senate. Who could be against this? Welcome to Washington, folks. So we now have implementing legislation, but that's a good thing too, because treaties don't go anywhere until an administration sends them to Congress, the Senate specifically, for their advice and consent. So in this instance, the administration decided to come up with implementing legislation, even though lots of very smart people, much smarter than me, said, we don't really need this. Why are we mucking up the works? And of course, the communities that most will benefit from this treaty did not want anything to muck up the works. So lots of folks in so-called civil society, technology groups again, others have gotten together, we've written to Congress, we've said, okay, look, we're not nuts about this idea of the implementing legislation. We can live with it as it is, and we can live with so-called report language connected to it, which kind of, think of it as legislative history. Sometimes it matters, sometimes it doesn't, but people fight over it anyway because people bill by the hour in Washington. Did I say that out loud? Oh well. Anyway, so now we have implementing legislation that's been referred to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. We have the treaty that has been formally transmitted by the administration, and we have a one-pager which says, please, when you speak to a Senate office, particularly if that senator, he or she is on the Foreign Relations Committee, we can't wait to ratify the Marrakesh Treaty. We should be working, if you're on the Judiciary Committee, we should be working on the implementing legislation right this very minute, and please don't change a comma. We can live with the implementing legislation as the price of getting this done relatively quickly and easily. We can live with the report language as it's written, which is why you see that phrase emphasized in the one-pager, but don't muck with it. The book desert, as it's been called over many, many years, that has been experienced by the print-disabled community has finally got to end. Make it rain, Congress. Don't goof around with this. Just get it done, please. And say that as emphatically as you want, because that's what they need to hear. So that's what's going on with the Marrakesh Treaty, and that's why it is a red shown badge ask, as we call them, printed right on the back of your badge, in case you forget what the most important things are that we're all talking about here today. I should note, by the way, that in terms of U.S. benefit for the Marrakesh Treaty, it's nationwide. So when you look at on the back of that one-pager, you'll see a handy-dandy chart of how many people in your state might actually, being print-disabled, benefit from this. And it ranges from enormous numbers in states like New York and Texas and California, as you might imagine, to even significant numbers in very small states. Just looking here quickly, Wyoming, almost 13,000, Vermont, almost 14,000, Nevada, 81,000. So this is something that will benefit everybody everywhere. And that's our message. Privacy and surveillance. Well, we're here because we can't have enough surveillance. No, sorry, different script. Wrong association. Librarians, as you've heard from Congressman Holt acknowledging this morning, have been, as you all know better than I, among the staunchest of privacy, personal privacy advocates in the United States, which is not to say that any of you or libraries in general, or certainly not ALA, is against security. We reject, as do our dozens and dozens of coalition partners, the notion that one has to choose between the two. It's back to balance. There is a way to constitutionally respect individual privacy as well as be safe. And that's the job of our elected leaders, not to pin the needle in the direction that the USA Patriot Act took it in 2011. We've been working hard with a significant success, you'll hear a little bit more about in a second, on bringing that needle a little bit back toward the middle in terms of bulk surveillance. The USA Freedom Act passed last year, as many of you may have heard. You should take a bow for that, not incidentally. And now we are on the cusp, good news, finally good news, of passing a really significant reform to the Electronic Communications Privacy Act. When I've met with people on the Hill, when I've talked to people at conferences, and I've explained to them that, well, you know, after your emails or texts or Instagrams and photos and documents in the cloud are older than 6 months, a search warrant is not required for law enforcement authorities to get the content of that information. Let me say that again. I goof around a little bit, but I am not goofing about this. When your emails, et cetera, and et cetera is a long list, are more than 6 months old, generally speaking, a real live search warrant from a real live judge, I hope a real live judge, is not necessary. A subpoena will do it. That's crazy. That is a gigantic hole in the Fourth Amendment. There are framers spinning at unheard of speeds in their graves as we speak as a result of this ridiculous hole, because ECPA was written when Chernobyl and mad cow disease and Oliver North standing there in front of the Iran-Contra hearing was in the news. That's how old ECPA is. Email was barely established in the United States when a law that governs the privacy of all of our emails and electronic communications was passed. So what do we do about it? Finally, after years, after much more coalition work, the House of Representatives passes last week. Your timing is exquisite, folks. 419 to 0, the Electronic Communications Privacy Act. Now, did they gut the bill so that everybody could support it? No, we actually fended off a very serious effort that delayed the whole thing for years to create a hole in the bill that has a big hole that we're trying to fix. Again, that's Washington, right? Gotta put a hole back in the bill, the hole of which you're trying to plug. You with me? Civil agency carve-out. What does that mean? It means that some people in Congress, including Chairman Goodlatte for a very long time, the chairman of that House Judiciary Committee where this bill has been bottled up, said, you know, the IRS tells me and the Securities and Exchange Commission tells me that unless we give them an exception from plugging this hole, they won't be able to do their investigations. All right, well, that, you know, you'd want to pay attention to that. So for years, we've been asking those agencies, show us the case where this was a problem. They demurred. Couldn't, didn't. Finally, Chairman Goodlatte relented, and the bill went through. So now you are here in Washington meeting with the Senate, because this is now a Senate issue, and Chairman Grassley from Iowa, Iowans here? And they're paying attention. They raised their hand. This is good. Chairman Grassley has to decide what to do. So we want the Senate to take up, as it says here on your one-pager, we want the Senate to take up and pass preferably the House bill. If they're not going to do the House bill, it ought to be something sure as heck like it, and under no circumstances should it have one of those nasty civil agency carve-outs. So far, so good. Let me pause there before I dive into a new issue. This is the real welcome to Washington that blew up within the last 2 weeks and really blew up within the last few days. And we'll go into detail about that. But anything on copyright or privacy, or my funny voices, as the case may be. Sorry, I've been asked to improve my diction fairly. The phrase I was using with respect to this hole that people are trying to put back in ECPA reform is the civil agency carve-out, an exception. To carve them out, term of art in Washington. CARVE, long knives, I guess, Washington thing. Okay. Yes, ma'am. Probably. Sorry, thank you for the reminder. The question was, is the enormous breadth of the hole in the Fourth Amendment for electronic records big enough to encompass all records in the clouds, in the cloud? There might be some small exceptions to that candidly my expert lawyer friends would be able to tell you about, and I will ask them now that you've asked. But I don't think so. I think, yes, it is pretty much everything stored in the cloud. And the way this would typically work is, they're not going to call you up and say, hi, would you mind downloading everything from the cloud and handing it over to us? They're going to go to your service provider, to whoever's managing that cloud for you, and they're going to present them with a subpoena on day 181, whereas they would have needed a search warrant on day 180. Other questions? Okay, so welcome to the Washington office's wacky world. So just when you thought it was safe to be in your office and say, all right, I'll get a cup of coffee and I'm going to put my feet up on the desk, or Jessica is, and tune into that exciting legislative branch appropriations markup. I'm sorry? Nope. And I'll just kind of chill out and listen to how much money Congress is going to give itself. It turns out that somebody adds language to that bill, and this is going to outrage you, I know, just because on its face it's just so incredibly ridiculous. To the extent practicable, the committee instructs the Library of Congress to maintain certain subject headings that reflect terminology used in Title VIII United States Code. Outrageous! What? What is this? What this is telling the Library of Congress, as it says here on a handy-dandy one-pager with some bullet points on the back, that I hope all of you have. We did our best to distribute these late. As I said, this issue came up after we printed lots of things. If you folks on the end of aisles still have a small stack of that document, would you send it left or right, as the case may be? State coordinators have this as well. And if you're missing it, we'll get it to you. But here's what we need you to do, and here's what it's about. As many of you know, some enterprising students, backed up by their library, backed up by the college, my alma mater, I'm proud to say, at Dartmouth, said to the Library of Congress, classifications of subject headings, as I've come to understand just in the last 2 weeks, change over time. Makes perfect sense to me. And oftentimes they change when the subject heading has become offensive to society at large, to individuals who were described. Catalogers understand this. It's apparently a very standard, non-controversial part of good library practice, good professional practice in cataloging that goes back to the beginning of library subject headings, which I'm now, I won't say expert in, but familiar with. They go back to 1898. I had no idea. And a subject heading, like Negroes, eventually became offensive and was changed to African Americans. In fact, there were 2 intermediary changes in that subject heading by the Library of Congress. Congress did not pay attention at the time. The phrase cripples, which causes many of us to cringe now, used to be a subject heading, got changed to handicapped persons or persons with disabilities. Pretty routine stuff. So when, given the impetus of the inquiry from students and from Dartmouth College, the request of the Library of Congress that they look into changing the subject heading illegal aliens, for example, the library did what good librarians do, and you would hope the Library of Congress has those. And it went through an extensive process. It had a stakeholders meeting. It decided it was going to make a couple of significant changes in its subject heading classifications. Well, you may have noticed that the issue of, let's call them illegal aliens, has been in the news a little bit. And this was not something that Congress processed as good library practice and cataloging expertise, some enterprising members of the House of Representatives introduced legislation that basically would forbid the changes in the US code of the phrase illegal aliens to anything else. And when they heard about the fact that the library, who announced this, or which announced this publicly, of course, in late March, was going to make a similar subject heading classification change, they said, no, 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 no. And this language that I just read to you, this seemingly innocuous language about Title 8 of the US Code, got interdicted. So that yawner of a legislative branch appropriations meeting actually was a meeting at which the subcommittee of the full House Appropriations Committee voted to include that language in their report, which is kind of like the person who pays all your bills saying, you know, I'd much rather you didn't do that. Do you hear me? They heard. I'm reminded, quite correctly, that not only did Dartmouth College request this change, but in a slightly different form, nothing less than the full council of the American Library Association at its last midwinter meeting adopted a resolution endorsing this request and, in effect, seconding it. Now, to the library's credit, as these materials you have points out, the library made an independent judgment. They didn't actually accept the request as propounded by the Dartmouth people. They didn't accept the request for a language change as propounded or endorsed by ALA. They made their own judgments and made their own recommendations. But nonetheless, here we are looking at a full House Appropriations Committee markup to be held most likely in about 2 weeks, as soon as Congress comes back. And if that language goes in, the library is not going to have a whole lot of choice, or at least is not likely to exercise much choice in what they do. And that subject heading classification is going to be effectively interdicted, nullified, ain't gonna happen. My guess is the librarians in this room, are there any librarians here? Catalogers, are you here? Stand up, catalogers. Stand up for the Library of Congress. Who else is gonna stand up for the library? Stand, if you're gonna be with the library, no, all right, never. We'll do the tent revival later. So, when stuff like this blows up, and we've got all of our nice little neat projected one-pagers done, you say, gosh, oh man, all that copying is over. Thank heavens we're ready for Ledge Day. As soon as you say we're ready for Ledge Day, somebody tells the Library of Congress that it can't do the right thing as a matter of professional librarianship, and by some people's lights, you know, social evolution. So what are we doing about it? Well, ALA and NLX, the presidents thereof, have written to the chairman of the full House Appropriations Committee and said in quite some detail, which you have in the bullet points on that one pager I was referring to, why this is not a justified thing to interdict, why this is really routine and should be regarded as such, and why it's entirely justified. And one of those justifications, not incidentally, is something called literary warrant, paying attention to whether or not a term has become offensive. It's really been quite interesting to me as a non-librarian getting up to speed on this. And in case anybody doubts whether or not this term has in fact become offensive, particularly to the groups that it purports to describe, calling a person illegal as opposed to an act is really the central issue here, and what's deemed to be illegitimate by many. The Pew Research Center, glad they're there, did quite a bit of good research. And the bottom line is that when you look at the number of times the phrase illegal aliens has been used, at times when the issue of illegal immigration was heavily in the news, between 2007 and 2013, it declined from being mentioned in 21% of the articles to just 5% of the articles. That's a 76% reduction in mentions. So we have groups like the AP, like the Los Angeles Times, many other significant journalistic outlets, as is pointed out in the paperwork, saying, yeah, you know, this makes sense to do, and we think so as well. So to the point of what we're going to do about it, we're going to sick all of you on the Appropriations Committee is what we're going to do about it. And we need a bunch of help because there are 51, count 'em, members of the Appropriations Committee from 30 different states. So with thanks and perhaps apologies to the 3 state delegations here that have brought the biggest delegations and have the most representation on the Appropriations Committee, that would be California, Texas, and Florida, I already hit them up for what I'm about to ask all of you to do. And that's to simply take a look. Can you read this more or less in the back? If not, we'll find another way to make this available. We'll leave this up during the lunch break. But what we'd like folks to do, if your state coordinators haven't briefed you on this yet, is to just simply take a look for your state and see whether or not there is a member of the House of Representatives, just the House at issue here, on that list. So that's step one. And there are the other states to whom I don't want to give short shrift. And in that instance, what we've done, every single state already has in its bag of tricks of leave-behinds, so-called leave-behinds for congressional offices, has the full ALA elects president's letter. And what we want to make sure, we've sent it electronically, of course, but we want you, the real live breathing constituents, to make sure this is under their noses. So that letter is already in the hands of your coordinator, and we would like that letter to be dropped off in all 51 of those offices by somebody in this room. Now, you may already have a meeting, by happy coincidence, scheduled with that appropriator. And if you do, that's great. If you don't, we need you to be bold. Call them up. See if they got 5 minutes to talk with you, even though you don't officially have an appointment. If you can't reach anybody, just drop by. And again, your state coordinators have some instructions about this as well. Drop by the office, say, hi, is the staffer that deals with appropriations happen to be around? Or with immigration, might be involved in this as well, although substantively, we don't think it's an immigration issue. Failing that, every single member of the House has somebody called a legislative director. All they need to do is come out, say, hi, glad you're a constituent. We're glad that you're here representing a state association with lots of constituents. We want to make sure you have this letter. It really counts. When Congressman Holt acknowledged that politics is local, he wasn't kidding. Tip O'Neill was right then. He's going to be right forever. And you are as local as it gets. So, why do we do this? To win. It's not about the winning, it's about what it is that we win. When libraries go to work, as Congressman Holt said, you are effective. It's not the loafers and the lace-ups on this stage that get the job done. The reason that The Hill, a very popular and widely read Inside the Beltway publication, listed the USA Freedom Act as among its top lobbying victories of 2015 and specifically acknowledged ALA, specifically by name acknowledged the contribution that libraries have made, as did multiple sponsors of the bill from the floor of the House and the Senate, is because when librarians speak up, Congress listens. It is that simple. Not because librarians, lobbyists speak up. Yeah, they listen to us once in a while. Why do they listen to us once in a while? Because they know you are behind us. That's why the president's letter about the Library of Congress classification issue starts out by saying, on behalf of the 58,000 members. Did you hear that, Congress? 58,000. All of whom know how to use email, all of whom know how to pick up the phone, many of whom are going to be knocking on their office doors in the next 2 days. This matters, and that's why we do it. You can make that difference. I'm talking to you, people watching the streaming broadcast as well. We want you in your hundreds of thousands. Are there hundreds of thousands of you out there? I don't know. We want all of you nonetheless to make the voice of libraries heard, because the voice of libraries is invariably, whether it's about Carla Hayden, whether it's about appropriations, whether it's about telecom, whether it's about government information, copyright, privacy, or anything else, the voice of libraries in Washington is the voice of the public. You have done it before, you can do it again, and we are sure as hell glad you're doing it here today and tomorrow. Thank you. Any questions? which I promise to repeat. Please remind me if I forget. Sir.
You mentioned in the packet for the coordinators
Yep.
that to read the letter, but I don't see a copy of the letter in my packet.
All right. We got a little work to do. We'll figure something out. The question was, did I lie was actually the question. My phrasing, not the questioners. Ooh, it's been suggested that I misapproximated a truism. I'm going to steal that line. Nixon. Great. Okay. I've been likened to Richard Nixon. Thank you. The question or the point raised was that the four-page or four-sided two-page letter with ALA and Alex logo at the top did not make it into at least some, I hope not many, of the coordinators' bags. So if you would take a look and let me know over lunch if that's the case, we'll figure out a plan B. Thank you. Sir.
Question for Kevin.
Sure.
So when LSTA was reduced, it appeared that it was IMLS that took money from the grants to states line at $950,000 roughly, and moved it around and ultimately put it into the museum line of their budget. So is that true? Does that have any relevance to the conversation tomorrow in what we're asking?
Yeah, is this on? Yeah, the question was, it appeared that the funding for the decrease in grants to states was actually moved into different pots of money within IMLS. And yes, that is true, because the actual... I'm sorry, it was the president's request only cuts LSTA $500,000, but the actual grants to state, which actually comes from IMLS through LSTA, was a bigger cut, because yes, they did move some funding around, and they do have to be mindful that the authorization levels require that certain levels of funding, they can't just move funding willy-nilly here and there. They do have some rules that they need to follow. So yeah, but they can move money around, but they need to continue the funding of the grants to states is really the most important, significant part of that funding. And that's also the biggest part of all of IMLS funding.
And the request you're asking us to talk about restores the reduction in grants to states?
Yeah, yes, we would like, at least level funding from last year, which was the $2 million increase. The letters that were circulated, the Dear Appropriator letters, actually asked for an increase of $186 million. And the reason that the congressional offices and we supported this, the reason they were asking for that increase is that's actually what the president requested last year. That's what the president decided was appropriate funding for LSTA. So the letters did ask that, and we got good support with those numbers on there.
Okay, I think the mystery of the missing document may have been solved. My apologies for confusion. I gather coordinators have been given a separate package of folders that are meant to be left behind with congressional offices. And I am told, at least the plan was, to have the four-sided letter, the ALA Alex banner logo letter, in just those folders, the ones to be left behind. But if there's a problem, do let us know. Thank you so much for your attention. Thank you for being here. Emily Sheketoff has a word before we turn you loose.
Okay, good morning. It's me again. I'm like your favorite bad penny all day. I'm going to keep coming back. So for a number of years, we've been here at what used to be the Holiday Inn. Now it's the Liaison Hotel. It's been sold, so who knows what it's going to be called next year. And we have as any of you who do events, we have a multi-year contract. The last year of our current contract is next year, and we are beginning to negotiate our contract for 2018. And we understand that the rooms here at the Liaison, or if it changes its name, will be at the minimum $335. And so we recognize that this is prohibitively expensive. And so I need you to talk to your colleagues who might potentially be coming to Ledge Day and let us know, should we be thinking about having a sleeping room block here again for 2018, 19, 20? Or should we just contract to have the meeting space and the food catering and not have sleeping rooms here? Or should we move the whole thing? If we moved across the street to the Hyatt, it's bigger, but it's more expensive. So it would be more than $335 at least for the room. Or there are other places we can go, but they are not on Capitol Hill. So we have sort of a Hobson, maybe this is even a Hobson's choice, but we've got, we want more people to be coming to Ledge Day. We need to continually increase the number of people who are here. So you need to communicate to me what is your preference. Is your preference for us to once again get a room block? And then if we don't meet that room block, we pay a tremendous penalty, which is unacceptable. Or we can just contract for the meeting room and we can try and find a room block someplace else where the rooms are more reasonable. Or we can just send you lists of hotels with prices and you can, negotiate your best price, do Airbnb, Priceline, whatever you choose to do. Or we can move the whole thing to another location, and then you would just have to travel for your congressional meetings and the congressional reception. So please, 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 the survey is online at ala.org/NLLD16, or all the state coordinators have gotten the survey, and please forward it to the members of your delegation. But we want to hear from you who participate and others who may not be here this year, but who might be participating in the future. We want to be responsive to you. So this is your Ledge Day. This is your effort to really help libraries deliver the services that we all know you want to deliver. So please let us know where your preference is. We recognize that Washington is becoming almost unaffordable, but it's such a great thing to do. It's so important for you to come and have these meetings, for the staff to see the commitment that libraries and library supporters have for their libraries. And as Congressman Holt mentioned, it really does make a huge difference. I was up on the Hill last week on another issue, and a couple of different offices said to me, "Oh yeah, we know the librarians are coming next week." They know you come every year. Some of them look forward to it. A few dread it. And that's because you're very well informed. So, there's not a lot of smoke blowing going on, as often happens. So we want to make sure that the most people who can continue doing this. And we want to do it in a way that is fun for you as well. Yes, Jan? Okay. Sure. Absolutely. So we have this contract that we have to do 3 years at a time, and we have to sign a 3-year contract a year before the contract is up. So we are trying to look into the crystal ball to figure out when's the weather going to be nice, when's both houses of Congress going to be in session, when is it not going to be Mother's Day, and all these things that go into it. The Congress sets their calendar in mid-January. So in mid-January of 2016, they set their calendar for 2016. And that's what happens every year. Sometimes it's a little later, it's never earlier. We've chosen May because it's a time when you can talk about appropriations. That hasn't happened yet. And it seemed to be a good time when issues were happening and we weren't in conflict with any of the other major ALA things like annual or midwinter or the board meetings. So that's sort of how we've come on this date. But certainly if people would like to comment on the time of year we do this, one of the things, January is a bad time of year because they're not always in session. July and August are bad. In election years, July, August, September, October, and November are bad. Sometimes December is bad because they're already gone. Or if they haven't done anything, then December it's really busy. So we sort of picked May. For a long time, we were falling every couple of years on Mother's Day, which people really didn't like. So now we make a real effort not to have newbie training on Mother's Day. And we're just trying to guess. So if there's a time that you think is better, I am not a brain surgeon. I do not have all the answers. So if other people have good ideas, we are very open to those ideas. Did that answer the question, Jan? Yes, lady in purple.
As far as location, is there a room at the Library of Congress?
We cannot do anything in a government building because this is political. And so we cannot be in the Visitor Center, the Library of Congress. IMLS can't get us a room. We have to be what's called off-site.
Okay, with that in mind, if you did the briefing session someplace a little further afield and had someplace, a room for the day on Capitol Hill, people could meet and congregate between meetings to discuss local news events and things like that. Not necessarily anything official, but almost like a legislative advocate lounge to congregate during that day.
Well, that would increase the cost for you considerably because we'd use our ask to get the reception room. So, and we can do that. We can ask for a reception room. We can't then ask for another we want a hangout room. They just don't have the rooms available. So really our choice is to have briefing day here, or we could try and negotiate, some other room that would be a little bit more expensive, but you wouldn't be paying as much for a hotel, somewhere around here, or, and by that I mean at the Hyatt Regency. That's the only spot that's big enough. Or get the sleeping rooms. Please keep in mind that, and we do this Monday, Tuesday, because we tried doing it Monday, Tuesday, and Tuesday, Wednesday, but we couldn't get the hotel to agree to that. So if we stop doing sleeping rooms, if we don't get a sleeping room block, if people want to go back to briefing day Monday, visits Tuesday, or briefing day Tuesday, visits Wednesday for the West Coast, please indicate that as well. We can only do that if we are not booking sleeping rooms. Yes, ma'am.
Are you looking at changing hotels because it's necessary because of the penalties not included, or are you looking at this for convenience?
The question was, why are we looking at changing hotels? We are looking at changing hotels strictly for the cost to the participants. We will we monitor very closely how many sleeping rooms we're able to sell, and as the price of the room goes up, we book fewer and fewer rooms because we know we can't fill them. But we have to be very careful about that, because a couple of years ago we got hit with a $12,000 penalty, and the Washington office doesn't have anything to fall back on. So, that really took a lot out of us, and Big ALA very graciously helped us with that, or it would have bankrupted us. Yes, sir.
What about the possibility of a hotel farther afield, which would reduce costs, increase the number of people, and possibly providing a shuttle bus to get people to the...
Okay, so the question was, what about a hotel farther afield and the possibility of a shuttle bus? Again, that would increase the cost of registration, which is low, so we would have to increase it, I don't know by how much. But we would look for a hotel that was either on the subway or people could easily get there. So I'm sorry, but I have to wrap up because we have the photograph now. So the photographer is here, and so he is going to tell us what to do, and listen to him so that you're all in the photograph. But I'm around all day, so if you've got more comments, fill out those surveys and let us know what you think.
Folks, if you'd stay in your seats for just a moment, the photo won't take long with everybody's cooperation, and you'll look marvelous.
Hello, everyone. Sorry to take a photo on